My grandson threw my birthday cake in the trash and said, "Old man, you should just stay locked in your room forever." He had no idea I owned the house, the land, and enough money to disappear forever without leaving them a single dollar. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Harold. I'm 75 years old. I don't talk much, and maybe that's why people think I'm weak. After my wife died 5 years ago, I moved into my son's house. I gave him everything I had left. I trusted him. His name is James. He promised he'd take care of me like I took care of him all his life. But those promises turned to dust. Now I live in a small room at the end of the hallway. I eat alone. I sit alone. And I sleep listening to laughter from the living room. Laughter I'm not part of. At first I told myself, they're just busy. But that lie became harder to believe. James stopped asking if I needed anything. His wife Melissa would leave food in a paper plate outside my door like I was some old stray dog. And Ethan, my grandson, the boy I once bounced on my knees, he turned cruel. Ethan is 22, tall, sharp tongue. He walks around like the king of the house. A few months after I moved in, he started making jokes about me. "Why don't we just lock Grandpa in the shed? Someone tell Harold dinner over before he gets there." And they all laughed. I said nothing, not once. I kept sweeping the porch, cleaning the dishes, folding the laundry, because I thought if I stayed kind, they'd change. But the more silent I stayed, the worse they became. One evening, I heard Ethan tell his friend he's just waiting to die. Useless, boring, and smells like old soup. His friend laughed, and something broke in me that day. But I didn't show it. I just nodded and walked past like I hadn't heard anything. That night I sat in my little room and opened the locked drawer of my old suitcase. Inside was a thick envelope, the sale papers of my old business and bank account details they had no idea about. Years ago I owned a furniture business. Solid woodwork, good money. I sold it before retirement, quietly. I kept the money quiet too. Because I wanted to see how people treated me when they thought I had nothing left. And now I knew. But I waited. I waited for one final moment to test if maybe I was wrong. That moment came on my birthday. It was a Saturday. I woke up early and shaved, combed my white hair neatly, wore my clean blue shirt, the one my wife always liked. I walked to the kitchen. Nobody looked at me. Melissa was talking on the phone. James was watching football. Ethan was scrolling through his phone, feet on the table. I stood there awkwardly and said, "It's my birthday today." Silence. Melissa said, "Oh, happy birthday, Harold." She didn't look up. James grunted, "Yeah, happy birthday, Dad." Ethan didn't say anything. Hours passed. No cake, no dinner plan. Around 6 p.m. I heard a knock at the door. Food delivery. Melissa took the bags and said, "We already ate. You can heat this up later." She walked away without another word. Then I saw it, a small chocolate cake on the kitchen counter. My heart lifted for a second. Maybe, just maybe, it was for me. I walked toward it. Ethan looked up and said, "Oh, it's for me and Ashley tonight. You seriously thought that was yours?" He laughed loudly, then picked up the cake and threw it in the trash bin. "Why don't you just stay locked in your room forever?" I stood still, then I smiled. He mocked me for smiling, creepy old man. But that smile wasn't weakness. That was the moment I knew backslash. They weren't my family anymore. They were strangers living in my house. Yes, asterisk my house. I quietly walked back to my room. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I took out my old notepad and began planning. I called my lawyer. I told him, "It's time, buy the villa we discussed. Make sure it's ready in 2 weeks. I'm moving out forever." I made a list of clothes I would take. I arranged a car rental. I even visited the villa once without telling anyone. It was perfect. Big garden, sunshine, silence. For the next 2 weeks I acted normal. I swept the floor. I smiled when they mocked me. Ethan once threw dirty laundry at my feet and said, "You missed a spot." I picked it up without a word. But I wasn't the same inside. Something had changed. I had made peace with leaving. And not just the house, but leaving the role of a silent, insulted man. Then came the night they crossed the final line. A distant cousin was visiting. Melissa walked into my room and said, "We need your room for the weekend. Can you sleep in the garage? Just 2 nights." I looked at her calmly and said, "Sure." Ethan tossed some blankets in the garage and said, "You'll be fine in here. Just pretend it's a vacation." That night I didn't sleep much. Not because I was uncomfortable, but because I was excited. I could already see the sunlight shining through my new villa's windows. My escape was close. I didn't say goodbye to anyone that night. I had something better planned. I laid on the cold garage floor with a thin blanket over me, staring at the ceiling full of spider webs. My back ached, my legs were stiff, but my heart was light for the first time in years, because I knew tonight was my last night under that roof. The same roof where I raised my son. The same roof where I carried groceries, mowed the lawn, paid the bills. And now the same roof where they treated me like a broken chair shoved into the corner. But they didn't know this chair still had legs and strength. Around midnight, I quietly opened my small suitcase. I had only packed what I needed: 3 shirts, 2 pants, a picture of my wife, my reading glasses, and the key to my new villa. My bank documents were in a brown envelope placed right at the top. As I zipped it shut, I looked around the garage. There was a pile of junk, broken toys, old shoes, rusty tools, and in the middle of that trash they had put me. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Never again." The next morning I got up before sunrise. No one else was awake. I washed my face in the garden tap, combed my hair with my fingers, and wore my cleanest shirt. Then I walked up to the front door of the house, suitcase in hand. The silence of the early morning was beautiful. Birds were singing. The wind was gentle. It felt like the world was opening its arms to me, finally. As I stepped inside the house for one last time, I left my suitcase near the door and walked into the kitchen. I made a cup of black coffee, just like I used to every morning when I was the head of this house. I stood there, sipping slowly, letting every sip wash away years of pain. Then I walked back to my room. On the small table next to my bed, I placed a letter. It was folded neatly in an envelope with "To James, Melissa, and Ethan" written in clear handwriting. I had written that letter 2 nights ago. It didn't have hate. It didn't have curses. It only had the truth. I walked back to the living room, looked around one last time, and chuckled. All the things in this house, they were bought with my money. The TV, the furniture, even the roof over their heads. And yet they made me feel like a squatter, but not anymore. Exactly at 6:45 a.m., a black car pulled into the driveway. It was the driver I had arranged through my lawyer. He stepped out, smiled, and opened the back door for me. As I picked up my suitcase and walked toward the car, I heard a voice behind me. "Where are you going, Grandpa?" I turned around. Ethan was standing there, shirtless, sleepy-eyed, holding a glass of soda. "Why are you dressed like that?" he asked, smirking. I smiled gently and said, "I'm moving to my new villa, alone." He blinked. "What villa?" Just then James came out in his robe. "Dad, where are you going?" Melissa followed, her face half covered in a face mask. "Are you going somewhere?" I stopped walking and turned fully to face them. "Yes," I said, "I'm leaving this house for good." James looked confused. "What do you mean? You don't have anywhere to go." I chuckled softly. "You thought I didn't." Ethan folded his arms. "What, did you win the lottery or something?" I opened my suitcase slightly and pulled out a single document, the property deed of my new villa, bought in full cash. "This says otherwise," I said. They all stared, mouths open. "I never needed to stay here," I said quietly. "I chose to. I gave you my time, I gave you my patience, and in return you gave me a corner to rot in. Well, not anymore." Melissa looked nervous. "Wait, what about this house?" "Oh," I smiled, "you'll find out in the letter." "Letter?" James asked. "Yes," I said. "In my room, or should I say, what used to be my room before you gave it to a guest." Ethan stepped forward. "You're just being dramatic." I looked at him calmly. "No, Ethan, I'm being free." I got into the car. The driver closed the door. As we pulled out of the driveway, I saw all three of them standing there in their morning clothes, confused, stunned, and completely silent. It felt good. No shouting, no big revenge, just a quiet walk out of a life I no longer belonged to. The ride to the villa took 2 hours. I didn't say much during the drive. I stared out of the window, trees passed by. The sky was clear, and my heart was lighter than it had been in years. When we reached, the driver helped with the bag and handed me the keys. I walked into the villa. The white walls smelled fresh. The windows were wide. The kitchen was full, and for the first time in a long time, the silence felt like peace, not punishment. I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over my garden. And back at the old house, they had just opened the letter. Back at the house I left behind, my son James held the letter in his hands, his fingers trembling slightly. Melissa stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes sharp but nervous. Ethan sat on the couch, legs wide apart like he always did, still trying to act unbothered. But I knew them. I had studied their expressions for years, and I knew right then they were shaken. I may have left quietly, but my silence had been sharper than any scream. James slowly unfolded the paper. My handwriting was clear and steady. Years of signing business documents made sure of that, and this is what they read. To James, Melissa, and Ethan asterisk. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Gone from this house, gone from this routine of being ignored, and gone from the corner you pushed me into. I stayed with you because I believed in love. I believed that family took care of each other. I believed my son would remember the father who worked 3 jobs to raise him, who sold his tools to pay for his college, who walked in the rain to bring him medicine. I believed that same boy, now a man, would protect me in my old age. I was wrong. I watched you all, every day. I saw how you looked through me like I was air. I heard Ethan laugh at me behind closed doors. I saw Melissa roll her eyes every time I asked a simple question. I kept telling myself, maybe tomorrow will be better. But it never was. You turned me into a ghost in my own family. But now I'm free. You thought I had nothing left. You were wrong. Years ago, I sold my company for a quiet retirement. I chose not to flash the money around because I wanted to see how you'd treat me when you thought I had nothing to offer. Sadly, your real faces showed. I've bought myself a villa, paid in full. You don't need to know where. You don't deserve to know. This house, you can keep it. Yes, it's still in my name, but I won't take it back. I don't want to fight. I just want to be at peace. Something I never had with you. Don't look for me. Don't try to call. My number is gone. My account's changed and my will rewritten. Ethan, you once told me to stay in my room forever. Now I have a whole house of my own, with sunlight, laughter, and space where no one throws my cake in the trash. Goodbye. Harold. When they finished reading, I'm sure the silence in that living room was louder than any words they could have spoken. I imagined James holding the letter tightly, his jaw clenched, realizing that the man he thought was poor and weak had just walked out with more dignity than any of them ever had. I imagined Melissa trying to act like she didn't care, but deep inside, I knew her pride was burning. And Ethan, that boy, must have felt it the worst. Because he never expected the old man, he mocked to be the one who had the last word. Meanwhile, I was already living that word. The villa was perfect. Not too big, not too small, just enough space for one man and his memories. My bedroom had wide windows with sheer white curtains. The sun came in gently every morning. I started each day with a hot shower, clean clothes, and a walk through the garden. There was no one to bark orders at me, no one to laugh at me, no one to lock me in a room like I didn't exist. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch, sipping iced tea, a neighbor walked by and waved. "Morning, sir." "Morning," I smiled back. That was all, simple kindness, something I hadn't received in years. Over the next week, I got to know a few neighbors. A retired school teacher named Bill, age 78, invited me over for chess. A kind widow named Susan, age 71, brought me homemade pie. People here didn't know my past. They didn't ask for favors. They just saw me as a man, not a burden, not an old fool, just Harold. Sometimes at night I thought about James, about how I raised him, how I sat by his bed when he had fever, how I clapped the loudest at his school plays. I thought maybe I failed as a father, or maybe people change with comfort. I don't know. But I do know this: I gave him love, and in return he gave me rejection. I'm not bitter, I'm just done. And the beauty of walking away is that it's never too late to choose yourself. I also hired my lawyer to prepare a legal transfer of this new villa to a small charity foundation after I pass away. No family inheritance, no hidden assets, nothing left for them to fight over. The life I built will end in peace, not in courtrooms or guilt-ridden apologies. A few days later, I received a letter. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. It was from Ethan. I opened it. "Grandpa, I'm sorry." That's all it said. No full sentence, no explanation. Just that. I folded the paper quietly and placed it in the drawer. I wasn't angry anymore. But I wasn't going back. Because peace, once tasted, is hard to give up. I didn't reply to Ethan's letter, not because I hated him, but because I was done being pulled into their world. A simple "I'm sorry" was not enough to erase years of silence, mockery, and cold eyes. That letter felt more like guilt than real change. And guilt fades, but peace, real peace, that stays if you protect it. Every morning I woke up before the sun. I opened the windows wide, let the fresh air in, and made myself a cup of hot coffee. I'd sit by the front porch and watch the first rays hit the flowers in my little garden. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I had planted 3 rose bushes, red, white, and yellow. My wife used to love roses. In many ways, this house felt like a quiet promise to her that I didn't give up on life, even when our own family did. The neighbors quickly became friends. Bill, the retired school teacher, came over every Wednesday for chess. He had a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue. "You don't talk much about your family," he once said. I simply replied, "There's not much to talk about." He nodded like he understood too well. Susan, the widow from across the street, brought me baked cookies and smiled like a young girl. "You remind me of my late husband," she said once, laughing. "Except you're much quieter and cleaner." I chuckled. The lightness in her voice gave me comfort. I never looked for love again, but I found companionship, and that was more than enough. Meanwhile, far from the quiet streets and smiling neighbors, my old house began to fall apart. A friend of mine, who still lived in that town, gave me little updates through short calls. James had started drinking again. Melissa was screaming more often, and Ethan, well, he wasn't laughing anymore. They had no one left to blame. James once tried to call me from another number. I didn't answer. He tried again and again. Finally, he left a voicemail. His voice sounded heavy. "Dad, I didn't know you felt that way. I thought you were okay. I thought you were fine. We were just busy, I guess. Melissa feels bad. Ethan, he's been quiet. I wish you would come back. We miss you. Please call me back, please." But I didn't. Because the truth was, I had told them without words how I felt, day after day, month after month. And they saw it. They just didn't care. Now that I was gone, they missed the warmth I brought. But I was no longer a blanket they could throw off and pick up when it got cold. One evening, while watching the sunset, I received a package. No name, no sender. Inside was a photo album, my old one, the same one I thought was lost. On the first page, there was a sticky note. "I found this under your bed, thought you might want it back. Ethan." I looked at the pictures. Me and my wife holding James as a baby, me teaching James how to ride a bike, family picnics, holidays, birthdays, all moments full of smiles, real ones. I stared at those photos for hours that night. Not because I wanted to go back, but because I wanted to remind myself I did love them. I did give them everything. And now I had nothing to feel guilty about. The next morning, I made a decision. I would write one final letter, not to them, but for myself, a letter that I'd keep in my drawer, so that if anything happened to me, someone would know why I left and why I never returned. My name is Harold. I am 75 years old. I left my family not out of hate, but out of love for myself. I gave them every chance to treat me with kindness, and they chose to ignore it. I gave them my home, my heart, and my silence, and they gave me their back. So I found a new life, a simple one, but full of dignity, and I will never regret that choice. If anyone finds this letter, know this. No matter how old you are, you still have the right to walk away from pain. You don't owe anyone your suffering, especially not the ones who call themselves family. I folded the letter and placed it under my photo album. Then I sat back down on my porch, closed my eyes, and smiled. That evening, I received a knock on the door. It was Susan, holding 2 cups of hot tea. She sat beside me and said, "You look like a man who's finally found home." I looked around, the peaceful street, the blooming roses, the sound of wind through trees. And I nodded. "Yes," I said, "I have." Back in my old house, they were still arguing, blaming each other for what they had lost. But me, I had already won. I never planned to become anything more than a man healing in peace. I didn't expect people to notice me, remember me, or care about my story. All I wanted was a little sun on my skin, some roses to water, and silence that didn't hurt. But somehow, without meaning to, my quiet life began to echo in the hearts of others. One morning, I was sitting on my porch sipping coffee when a boy from the neighborhood, maybe 14 or 15, walked by with his school bag. His name was Ryan. We'd only exchanged waves until then. That morning, he stopped. "Hey, can I ask you something?" I nodded, "Sure." He looked nervous. "How do you stay so calm all the time?" I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He kicked the ground with his shoe. "My dad yells a lot. My mom cries even more. I hate being home, but you sit here like nothing bothers you." I paused, then I patted the bench beside me. He sat down. I told him, calm doesn't come from what's outside. It comes from choosing not to let the noise in. He looked confused but thoughtful. "Did you always have that choice?" "No," I replied, "but I learned it, after I wasted years letting others decide how I should feel." He nodded slowly. That conversation became the first of many. Ryan started stopping by often, sometimes with math homework, sometimes with random questions about life. I never gave him speeches, just short answers, honest ones, and I think that's what he needed. Soon more people began visiting. Susan would sit and knit beside me on slow afternoons. Bill and I hosted a little chess corner under the tree on Sundays. Even the grumpy man from the end of the street, Walter, age 82, started waving back when I said hello. One weekend, our little community planted a new garden near the corner bench. It wasn't much, just flowers and shrubs, but it brought smiles. We called it the Peace Patch. Someone hung a small wooden sign under the tree. It said, "Started by Harold, proof that peace grows where love is planted." I didn't know what to say. I had never been honored before, not by strangers, not even by my own family. That night I sat on my porch in silence, staring at that little sign across the road. I thought about how I used to beg for attention in my old house. One kind word, one birthday wish, just one moment of respect. Now, without begging, I had something even better, quiet appreciation. But far away, back at the house I left, things were getting worse. I received another update through my old friend Tom. He had gone by the house one day and called me afterward. "They don't talk to each other much," he said. "I saw James sitting outside alone. He looked 10 years older. Melissa, well, she's always on her phone, packing like a storm. And Ethan, he's moved out, got into a fight with them, blamed them for how things turned out." I didn't feel joy hearing that. I felt hollow. I had once dreamed of that house being filled with love, grandchildren laughing, holidays full of warmth. Instead, it became a cold shell, full of noise but no soul. A few weeks later, I received another letter. This time it was from James. Dad, I read your letter every night, and every time I do, it hurts, because I see how blind I was. I thought giving you a roof was enough. I didn't see that what you needed was love, presence, respect. Melissa and I aren't doing well. Ethan's gone. The house is quiet and not in a good way. You were the soul of this place. We didn't see it until you left. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I'm sorry, truly. I miss you. James. I held the letter for a long time. I didn't cry, I didn't smile, I just sat with it. Because sometimes sorrow doesn't shout. It just sits quietly beside you, breathing slowly. But I didn't reply. Not out of revenge, but because I had nothing more to say. Forgiveness doesn't always need a reply. It just needs a decision inside your own heart. I forgave them, but I didn't forget, and I wasn't going back. Instead, I wrote something new in my journal that night. I was once treated like a shadow in my own home. Now I shine quietly in a place I never expected to find. They called me useless, but I've helped more people with silence than they ever did with words. My days continued like a calm river. Books, tea, friendly hellos, laughter from neighbors. Nothing big, nothing flashy, just dignity. That was all I had wanted, and now I had it. Sometimes strangers would walk by and say, "You're Harold, right? The one from the sign." And I'd smile and nod. Yes, I was Harold. The man who was told to stay in his room. Now the man who made the whole street feel like home. It was a bright Saturday morning. The breeze was soft, and the sky had not a single cloud. I had just finished watering my roses when I noticed a small crowd forming across the street near the Peace Patch. At first, I thought it was just the usual kids playing or neighbors chatting. But then I saw Susan walk over to me, holding a folded paper. She smiled. "You might want to put on your nice shirt, Harold. There's something going on today, and you're the reason." I raised my brow. "What are you up to now?" She winked and walked off. I chuckled, wiped my hands on my pants, and went inside. I changed into my clean white shirt, combed my hair, and stepped outside just in time to hear someone tap on a microphone. It was Bill. "Everyone," he said, "thank you for being here. We don't gather here for just anyone. Today, we're here because of a man who showed us that strength doesn't need a loud voice, and kindness doesn't need applause." I stood near the back, watching quietly, heart pounding. "This street has changed in the past few months," he continued. "There's more peace, more smiles, more connection, and all of us know why. It started with Harold. He doesn't say much, but he listens. He doesn't demand respect, but he earns it. And today, we want to say thank you." Everyone clapped. I didn't know where to look. Then a little girl ran up with a small wooden box. She held it up to me. Inside was a bronze plate. It read, "To Harold for showing us that dignity, grace, and kindness are louder than noise." My lips trembled. My hands shook slightly as I touched the plate. I couldn't speak. I just nodded and mouthed, "Thank you." That evening, the same little girl, her name was Ellie, sat beside me on the porch. She was 7, with curly blonde hair and endless questions. "Why do you live alone?" she asked. I looked out at the road. Because sometimes, alone is better than being surrounded by people who don't see you. She frowned, "But I see you." I smiled. "I know, and that means everything." I didn't realize it then, but this little community was giving me something my own family never did: value without expectation. They didn't care about what I had or didn't have. They cared about who I was, the real me. But far away in that house I had left, someone else was changing too. Ethan. He sent one last letter. I didn't expect it. Dear Grandpa, I was cruel to you. I made fun of you. I mocked your silence, not realizing it was stronger than my loudest words. After you left, I felt something break, not just in the family, but in me. I left the house. I live on my own now. I started working. Not much, just delivering groceries and odd jobs, but it's mine. I used to think being old made someone useless. I was wrong. You had more strength than any of us. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just hope someday I can become a man like you. Love, Ethan. That night I sat in my garden chair for hours, letter in hand, stars overhead. I thought of the boy who used to ride on my shoulders and fall asleep in my lap. The boy who later threw my birthday cake in the trash. And now the boy who was learning what being a man really meant. I closed my eyes and whispered, maybe there's hope after all. I didn't reply, but I sent a gift through my lawyer, a small toolbox and a note that read, "Build your life with your hands, that's how I did it. H." I never expected a thank you. I didn't need it because I had found peace, and now I had given him a direction. One afternoon, Bill sat next to me during our regular chess match. "You've changed this street," he said. I shook my head. "No, I just stopped letting people change me." He smiled. "That's what made all the difference." Susan later added a bench plaque under the tree where we played chess. It read, "Harold's Corner, where silence speaks louder than words." I never wanted attention, but somehow, in being invisible, I became unforgettable. Weeks later, I was looking through my old photo album again, not with sadness, but with understanding. Every photo, every memory was a step in the journey. Painful steps, joyful ones, heavy ones, but they all led me here. To a small villa, a peaceful garden, and a street full of strangers who became better family than the ones who shared my blood. I was no longer Harold, the old man forgotten in the back room. I was Harold, the man who left and lived. The summer passed gently, with calm mornings, warm evenings, and days filled with light laughter from neighbors, children, and quiet conversations over coffee. I had never known this kind of peace before, not even in my younger days. I thought peace came with success, wealth, or the approval of your family. But peace, real peace, comes when you stop proving your worth to people who never tried to understand you. I was sitting in my usual chair on the porch, my old hands folded in my lap when I saw a familiar face walking down the lane. I adjusted my glasses and stood slowly. As the figure came closer, my heart skipped. It was Ethan. He looked different, leaner, tanned, and his hair slightly grown out. He was no longer the boy who mocked me. He was a man now, not perfect but changed. He paused at the garden gate, unsure. I stepped forward and opened it without a word. "Hi, Grandpa," he said softly. I nodded, "Come in." We sat on the bench under the tree where Susan had placed the plaque. He looked around at the garden, the clean porch, the flowers blooming in neat lines. He noticed the chessboard on the table, mid-game, waiting. "I didn't expect this," he said. "What? You alone happy?" I smiled. "That's the point, you didn't expect it." He sighed and reached into his backpack, pulling out an old photo. It was me and him when he was about 4, sitting on my lap eating ice cream, both our faces messy but smiling. "I forgot this version of me," he whispered. I looked at the picture and then at him. He's still in there, just buried under noise. He swallowed hard. "I was angry, I blamed you for I don't even know what, but the truth is I was lost. And now I'm learning. I work at a garage. I live in a small room above it. I sweep the floor, clean tools, but every night I sleep knowing I earned that bed." I reached out and patted his shoulder. "That's more than most people twice your age." We sat in silence for a while. No drama, no tears, just the wind, the birds, and time passing gently between generations. Before he left, he said, "I don't want anything from you, Grandpa, just a second chance." I smiled. Then come play chess sometime, that's all I need. He left, walking back down the lane with slower, thoughtful steps. A week later, Ethan came again. Then once more, and again. He never stayed long. Sometimes he brought fresh bread. Other times just sat and listened. He asked about my life, my childhood, my past. One day he asked, "Why didn't you yell at us when we treated you badly?" I looked at him. Because yelling would have made me like you, and I didn't want to lose myself just to teach you a lesson. I knew one day life would teach you better than I ever could. He nodded. It did. I never spoke to Emma or David again. They never visited. I heard from a neighbor they fought over the house after I left. Eventually, they sold it to cover some debts. I didn't feel sad. I had already grieved the family I thought I had. And I had built a new one now, with neighbors, with children who ran to me for cookies, and slowly with Ethan. I donated most of my money to build a small public garden and a reading room at the end of our street. It had a simple plaque. For those who feel forgotten, may you always find a place to sit and breathe. On my 81st birthday, the street threw me a surprise party. Nothing fancy. Just laughter, cake, stories, and music from an old radio. As we danced slowly on the porch, Susan hugged me and whispered, "You taught us what strength looks like." I looked around. Everyone was smiling. Ethan was helping Ellie cut the cake. Bill was playing chess with a teenager. A place that once felt so far from family had become exactly that. I stood up, raised my cup of lemonade, and said, "To all those who told me to stay in my room, I did. But then I built a better one." Everyone laughed and cheered. That night, as the moon rose and the stars blinked awake, I sat quietly under the tree one last time. I wasn't tired. I wasn't angry. I wasn't lonely. I was complete. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just someone's grandfather. I was Harold. A man who left behind silence and found everything he needed in it.